Commander Frank Miller stared at the vast emptiness of space through the massive viewport of the USS Defiant. The stars looked like tiny diamonds scattered across black velvet. His weathered face reflected the soft blue glow from the control panels. 20 years in space had left lines around his eyes and gray in his hair, but his gaze remained sharp and alert. "Sir, we're picking up an unusual energy signature," said Lieutenant Samantha Wright, her fingers dancing across the sensor. "Station. It's unlike anything in our database." Frank nodded and straightened his uniform. "Location?" "Just beyond Pluto's orbit, sir. Whatever it is, it's big." The bridge crew fell silent. Humanity had only recently ventured beyond their solar system, establishing a handful of colonies on nearby exoplanets. Their technological progress had been explosive since the discovery of quantum drive technology 50 years ago. What would have taken thousands of years of advancement happened in mere decades. "Put it on screen," Frank ordered. The main display flickered to life, showing what appeared to be a tear in the fabric of space itself. The anomaly pulsed with strange energy, expanding slowly. "Is it a natural phenomenon?" Frank asked. Chief Science Officer Dr. Paul Gordon shook his head. "No, sir. The patterns are too regular. This is artificial." As they watched, a massive ship emerged from the anomaly. It dwarfed the Defiant, its hull gleaming with an iridescent material that seemed to shift colors as it moved. The alien vessel was followed by another, then another, until 12 identical ships had appeared. "Battle stations," Frank said calmly. "Inform Earth Defense Command we have first contact, and let's hope it's friendly." Alarms blared throughout the ship as crew members rushed to their positions. The Defiant wasn't primarily a warship. It was an exploration vessel with defensive capabilities. If these aliens were hostile, they would need reinforcements. "They're hailing us, sir," Communications Officer Eric Bailey reported. "Audio and visual." Frank took a deep breath. On screen, the image of a being appeared on the display. It had gray skin that looked like polished stone, 4 eyes arranged in a diamond pattern, and no visible mouth. When it spoke, the sound seemed to come from everywhere at once. "Humans of Earth," the alien said in perfect English. "I am Ambassador Zorn of the Galactic Hegemony. We have observed your species for some time." Frank maintained his composure. "This is Commander Frank Miller of the Earth Defense Fleet. We welcome peaceful contact with your civilization." The alien made a gesture that might have been amusement. "Peace is available to those who accept their proper place. The hegemony has ruled this galaxy for 10,000 years. We bring order and stability to primitive species such as yours." Frank felt a chill run down his spine but kept his expression neutral. "We're always interested in learning from more advanced civilizations, but Earth and its colonies are independent territories. Independence is an illusion maintained only until a greater power arrives," Ambassador Zorn replied. "The Hegemony Council has determined that your solar system falls within our expansion zone. We offer you the opportunity to join us as a protectorate species." "And if we decline?" Frank asked. "Then you will be designated as uncooperative and appropriate measures will be taken. The choice is yours, but be aware that no species has successfully resisted the hegemony in 5,000 years. Frank's jaw tightened. "This is not a decision I can make alone. I request time to consult with Earth's leadership." "You have 48 hours, the ambassador said. "We will send a diplomatic vessel to your planet to receive your answer." The communication ended, and the bridge was silent for several moments. "Send everything to Earth immediately," Frank ordered, "and prepare for emergency jump back to Earth orbit." The quantum drive engaged, folding space around the Defiant. The trip that would have taken months with conventional engines was completed in seconds. When they arrived, Earth was already on high alert. The alien message had been received by multiple outposts and relayed home. The United Earth government had called an emergency session. Frank transported directly from the Defiant to the UEG headquarters in Geneva. The Grand Council chamber was filled with representatives from every nation and colony. President Susan Clark, a tall woman with silver hair and piercing blue eyes, sat at the center of the semicircular table. "Commander Miller," she greeted him, "your report matches what we've received from our outposts. These aliens, this hegemony, they've given us an ultimatum. Frank nodded. Yes, Madam President. They expect an answer within 48 hours. General Olivia Martinez, head of Earth Defense Forces, spoke up. Their technology appears to be significantly advanced. Our scans show energy readings far beyond our visible fleet capabilities. President Clark looked around the room. Options? Could attempt to negotiate more favorable terms, suggested the representative from the Mars colony. Perhaps limited hegemony presence with maintained human autonomy. History suggests that appeasing expansionist powers rarely ends well, countered the African Union delegate. Once they have a foothold, they'll take everything. Frank cleared his throat. There's something else you should know. When we were returning to Earth, we detected communications between their fleet and what appear to be scout ships already positioned throughout our solar system. They've been watching us closely. The room erupted in concerned murmurs. How long? President Clark asked. Based on the communication patterns, possibly decades, Frank replied. President Clark stood, silencing the room. Then they don't know everything about us, do they? She walked to a security panel and placed her palm on it. Security Protocol Alpha 97, Authorization Clark Epsilon Victor. A holographic display appeared in the center of the room, showing schematics of ships and weapon systems that few in the room had ever seen. Since the Mars ruins discovery, we've been developing technologies based on what we found, President Clark explained. These projects have been kept secret from the public and compartmentalized even within the government. Frank stared at the display in amazement. The ships shown were unlike anything in Earth's known fleet. Project Harbinger, President Clark continued. A fleet of vessels with capabilities far beyond what we've publicly demonstrated. We always feared we weren't alone in the galaxy. It appears we were right to prepare. General Martinez stepped forward. The hegemony has observed our conventional forces, our public technological level. They haven't seen what we're truly capable of. President Clark turned to Frank. Commander Miller, when their diplomatic vessel arrives, I want you beside me. We'll listen to their terms, appear to consider them carefully, and then a slow smile spread across her face. Then we'll show them why humanity has survived every threat it has ever faced. Frank noticed something unusual in the room. The tension had broken, replaced with a strange confidence. Some officials were even smiling. Are we really considering fighting a galactic empire? Asked a colony representative. No, President Clark replied. We're considering teaching them why that would be a terrible mistake. As Frank left the meeting, he couldn't help but wonder if humanity's notorious unpredictability was about to become their greatest weapon. The hegemony diplomatic vessel arrived exactly on schedule. It descended through Earth's atmosphere with surprising grace for its massive size, landing in the designated area outside Geneva. The ship resembled a giant teardrop made of shifting metal that reflected sunlight in rippling patterns. A crowd had gathered behind security barriers, watching with a mixture of fear and curiosity. News drones hovered above, broadcasting the historic event worldwide. Commander Frank Miller stood beside President Susan Clark on the welcoming platform, along with several government officials and military leaders. Interesting, Frank said, quietly. They're making quite a show of their arrival. President Clark nodded slightly. Psychological tactics. They want to impress us with their technological superiority. A doorway appeared in the smooth hull of the alien ship, seeming to melt away rather than slide open. 4 figures emerged. The first was Ambassador Zorn, followed by 3 other aliens of the same species but wearing different ornate garments. As they approached, Frank noticed that their movements were stiff and deliberate, as if Earth's gravity was uncomfortable for them. They stopped a few meters away from the human delegation. President Susan Clark, Ambassador Zorn said, his voice resonating strangely in the open air. We appreciate your willingness to receive us. Welcome to Earth, President Clark replied with a pleasant smile. We've prepared a meeting facility where we can discuss your proposal comfortably. The aliens followed the human delegation into a large circular building, specially constructed for the occasion. Inside, A round table with equal seating for both groups dominated the space. The ceiling was transparent, allowing natural light to fill the room. Once everyone was seated, Ambassador Zorn placed a small device on the table. It projected a three-dimensional map of the galaxy, with certain areas highlighted in different colors. The galactic hegemony controls over 60% of the Milky Way, he explained. The blue regions are core worlds, the green are established protectorates, and the yellow are expansion zones. He pointed to a tiny speck of light. Your solar system is here, in an area designated for integration within the next standard cycle. What exactly does integration involve, More? President Clark asked. A simple process, Zorn replied. Your governing systems would report to a hegemony overseer. Resource quotas would be established based on your system's capacity. Your military would be disbanded with defense provided by hegemony forces, and your more gifted individuals would be given opportunities to serve throughout the empire. General Martinez leaned forward. And if we refuse these terms? One of the other aliens wearing red robes spoke for the first time. I am Admiral Vexilor of the Hegemony Fleet. Refusal is not recommended. Primitive species who resist typically suffer significant population reduction before accepting inevitable hegemony. Rule. The room grew tense. Frank noticed President Clark's expression hadn't changed. She still wore that same pleasant smile. I see, she said calmly. And how many species have joined your hegemony willingly? 327 species serve the hegemony, Ambassador Zorn stated proudly. Some joined through diplomatic means, others required demonstration of our power. President Clark nodded thoughtfully. And has any species ever surprised you? Perhaps demonstrated capabilities you didn't anticipate? The aliens exchanged glances that Frank couldn't interpret. There have been unexpected resistances, Admiral Vexilor admitted, but all eventually submitted. President Clark stood up slowly. Thank you for this enlightening presentation. We'll need time to consult with our global representatives before giving our answer. You have 24 hours remaining, Zorn reminded her. That will be sufficient, she replied. After the aliens returned to their ship, the human leaders gathered in a secure underground facility beneath the Geneva complex. The mood was surprisingly light given the circumstances. Well, they're certainly confident, General Martinez observed. Arrogant is the word I'd use, Frank added. They truly believe we have no choice. President Clark activated a secure communication system. This is President Clark. Initiate Operation Sunrise. Authorization code, Phoenix Alpha 79 Delta, she turned to the others. The hegemony has given us an ultimatum. I think it's time we gave them our answer. Over the next 12 hours, unusual activity was detected around military bases worldwide. Civilian observation satellites were temporarily disabled for maintenance. Transport ships departed Earth orbit on courses away from populated areas. The following morning, the human delegation returned to the meeting facility. The aliens were already waiting. President Clark, Ambassador Zorn greeted her. We trust you've reached a wise decision. We have, she replied. The people of Earth have considered your offer carefully. She gestured to a staff member who activated a large display screen. It showed a live feed of space just beyond Earth's moon. The hegemony fleet was visible, 12 massive ships holding position. Before we give our formal response, President Clark continued, we believe it's important that we understand each other clearly. Your fleet represents your power. We would like to demonstrate ours. Admiral Vexilor made a sound that might have been laughter. You have no comparable fleet. Our scans have identified all your military vessels. All the ones we wanted you to see, General Martinez said with a slight smile. President Clark pressed a button on the table console. Captain Alan Shepard, you may proceed. For a moment, nothing happened on the screen. Then suddenly, space itself seemed to ripple around the hegemony fleet. 50 ships appeared as if from nowhere, surrounding the alien vessels. They were sleek, angular crafts with no visible propulsion systems, their dark hulls absorbing rather than reflecting light. What is this? Admiral Vexilor demanded, standing abruptly. This is just one battle group of Earth's defense fleet. President Clark explained calmly. The Harbinger Initiative. We've maintained certain technological capabilities. As got your private information. The alien stared at the screen in obvious shock. One of the human ships, slightly larger than the others, moved closer to the hegemony fleet. It was so dark it appeared as simply a ship-shaped void against the stars. That is the USS Harbinger, President Clark said. Captain Shepard, please. Demonstrate capability level 1. On the screen, a pulse of energy rippled from the Harbinger. When it touched the hegemony vessels, their lights flickered briefly. What did you do? Ambassador Zorn asked, his voice lacking its usual confidence. A simple technology we developed, President Clark replied. It temporarily disrupts quantum field alignments. Your ship's primary weapons are currently offline. Don't worry, the effect lasts only a few minutes. Admiral Vexilor's 4 eyes blinked rapidly. Impossible. Our shield technology is beyond your civilization's comprehension. Frank noticed several humans in the room were trying not to smile. Perhaps, President Clark said, we should discuss more equal terms for our relationship with the galactic hegemony. We have no desire for conflict, but as you can see, we are not defenseless. Ambassador Zorn seemed at a loss for words. Admiral Vexilor was communicating frantically with someone through a personal device. Our ships report no lasting damage, Vexilor finally said. But they confirm weapon systems were temporarily disabled. This changes our assessment of your species. I'm pleased to hear that, President Clark replied. Now shall we begin real negotiations? As equals? The aliens conferred among themselves briefly. The hegemony would be willing to discuss alliance status, Ambassador Zorn said reluctantly. Frank caught General Martinez's eye across the table. She looked like she was fighting back laughter. The first challenge had been met, and humanity had surprised the galaxy. 2 days after the surprising display of human technology, negotiations between Earth and the galactic hegemony continued in the Geneva facility. The mood had shifted dramatically. The aliens no longer spoke with commanding tones, but instead approached the discussions with cautious respect. Frank Miller observed the change with satisfaction as he sat beside General Martinez. President Clark led the human delegation with calm confidence, while Ambassador Zorn seemed increasingly uncomfortable. Our revised proposal offers Earth Associate status within the hegemony, Zorn said, placing a new data device on the table. Your military forces may remain independent, though we request cooperation on mutual defense matters. President Clark reviewed the offer on her tablet. This is certainly more reasonable than your initial terms, but there are still aspects we find concerning, particularly these resource quotas. Admiral Vexilor, who had been silent for much of the meeting, finally spoke. The hegemony requires certain raw materials to maintain stability across our territories. All member worlds contribute. We understand the concept of fair trade, President Clark replied, but these figures represent nearly 30% of our system's mineral production. That's excessive. As the negotiations continued, Frank received a private message on his secure device. He excused himself and stepped outside, where Captain Alan Shepard was waiting. Commander Miller, Shepard greeted him with a firm handshake. Shepard was younger than Frank by about a decade, with sharp features and intense eyes that missed nothing. We've completed our analysis of their fleet. And, Frank prompted. It's strange, Shepard said, lowering his voice despite the secure location. Their technology is advanced in some ways, but almost primitive in others. Their weapon systems use principles we abandoned decades ago. Their communication encryption is laughably simple. Frank frowned. That doesn't make sense. They control most of the galaxy according to their own claims. That's just it, Shepard continued. We've been analyzing their star charts. The areas they claim to control, many contain stars that would make planetary development nearly impossible. Others show resource patterns that contradict their statements about what they harvest from those systems. You think they're lying about the extent of their empire? I think they're exaggerating significantly, Shepard confirmed. Dr. Gordon has a theory. He thinks the hegemony grew powerful long ago by conquering nearby systems, then simply began claiming they controlled more territory than they actually did. Each new species they encountered believed they were facing an overwhelming force, So, they surrendered without much resistance. Frank considered this a bluff, an empire built on reputation rather than actual strength. Exactly. And we didn't fall for it. Frank returned to the negotiation room with this new perspective. He passed a note to President Clark, who read it without changing her expression. But when she looked up at the alien delegation, her approach subtly shifted. "Ambassador Zorn," she said, "we've been discussing your terms as if the hegemony truly controls the territories you claim. But what if we told you we've been conducting our own stellar surveys for decades? Surveys that suggest your actual domain is perhaps a tenth of what you've stated?" The effect was immediate. Zorn's gray skin seemed to pale further, and Admiral Wexler stiffened noticeably. "Such accusations are unfounded," Wexler said, but his voice lacked conviction. President Clark smiled. "Let's be honest with each other. Your ships are impressive, but our analysis suggests they're designed to intimidate rather than to wage sustained warfare. Your empire has grown through fear and deception rather than actual conquest, hasn't it?" The room fell silent. Finally, Ambassador Zorn spoke in a quieter voice than before. "The original hegemony was indeed vast," he admitted, "but over thousands of years, maintaining control over distant systems became challenging. Our ancestors found it more effective to cultivate the perception of unlimited power." General Martinez couldn't contain a short laugh. "So you travel around bullying younger species with outdated technology and empty threats?" Admiral Wexler stood in apparent anger. "Our technology is still superior to most species we encounter. The hegemony brings order and stability." "Through lies," Frank interrupted. "How many of those 327 species actually exist? How many are just names you made up to sound more impressive?" The Admiral slowly sat back, down defeated. 96, Ambassador Zorn said quietly. "We currently maintain relations with 96 species. Many of the others have died out or broken away over the millennia." President Clark leaned forward. "Here's what's going to happen now. You're going to drop all pretenses of making Earth a protectorate or even an associate. Instead, we'll establish diplomatic relations as equals. Fair trade, cultural exchange, mutual respect." She paused to let her words sink in. "And you're going to tell us the truth about what's really out there in the galaxy. The real threats, the real opportunities. No more deception." The aliens conferred, briefly in their own language before Ambassador Zorn responded. "We find these terms acceptable. Though I must warn you, revealing the hegemony's true nature could have consequences. Some species serve us out of genuine fear." "That's their choice," President Clark replied. "But humans always prefer truth, even when it's uncomfortable." As the meeting concluded, preparations began for a formal treaty signing. Word spread quickly through Earth's government about the hegemony's deception. Many officials were amused rather than angry, relieved that the galaxy might not be as dangerous as they first feared. Later that evening, Frank joined Captain Shepard and Dr. Gordon on the observation deck of the Geneva facility. They watched the lights of the hegemony diplomatic vessel glowing softly in the distance. "I still don't understand," Frank said. "If their technology isn't as advanced as they claimed, how did they manage to appear out of nowhere when they first arrived?" Dr. Gordon smiled. "That's the fascinating part. Their jump technology is actually quite remarkable, perhaps the one area where they truly excel. We believe it was developed by another species they conquered long ago. So they do have some legitimate advantages," Shepard noted. "Yes, but nothing compared to what they pretended," Gordon replied. "Their entire strategy relied on species surrendering before discovering the truth." Frank stared at the alien ship thoughtfully. "And what about us? Should we tell them that some of our ships were just holograms? That we couldn't actually disable all their weapons?" Shepard grinned. "Where would the fun be in that? Besides, they started the bluffing game." The three men laughed, the sound carrying across the quiet night. Unknown to them, Ambassador Zorn stood at a viewport of his own ship, watching the humans with newfound respect and concern. He activated his communication device. "Central Command, we have a situation. The humans are different. They saw through our deception. Worse, I believe they're playing the same game, but better than we ever have. Recommend immediate protocol change for all future encounters with Earth vessels. As he ended the transmission, Zorn couldn't help but wonder what other surprises these unusual humans might have in store for the galaxy. 1 week after the treaty signing ceremony between Earth and the Galactic Hegemony, Commander Frank Miller found himself aboard the USS Harbinger. Captain Alan Shepard had invited him to witness the ship's capabilities firsthand. As they walked through the sleek corridors, Frank marveled at the advanced technology that had been kept secret from the public for so long. How many people knew about these ships? Frank asked as they entered the command center. Less than 500 people, worldwide, Shepard replied. Each component was developed by different teams who didn't know what they were really building. Only when everything came together did the full project become clear. The command center was unlike any Frank had seen before. Instead of traditional control stations, crew members wore lightweight neural interfaces that allowed direct communication with the ship's systems. The walls displayed a complete 360-degree view of space around them, making it feel as if they were floating among the stars. President Clark has authorized me to share something with you, Shepard said, leading Frank to a private room off the main bridge. Something even most of the Harbinger crew doesn't know. Inside the room, a holographic display showed a star map of the Milky Way. Certain regions were highlighted in various colors. The hegemony claimed to control these blue sections, Shepard explained, pointing to nearly 60% of the galaxy. We now know their true territory is limited to these green areas. The green sections covered barely 5% of the total, but that's not what I wanted to show you. Shepard touched a control, and new red markings appeared scattered throughout the galaxy. These are signals we've been detecting for decades. Communications and energy signatures that don't match hegemony patterns or any known natural phenomena. Frank studied the display with growing concern. Other civilizations? We believe so, and based on the energy output, some are far more advanced than the hegemony ever was. Have they detected us? Shepard shrugged. Unknown. But here's the interesting part. He zoomed in on one section. Many of these signals increased in frequency and intensity right after our confrontation with the hegemony fleet, as if they were watching, waiting to see what would happen. Frank felt a chill run down his spine. So we might have just announced our presence to the entire galaxy. Exactly. The hegemony was never the real threat. They were just the neighborhood bully, but now the real powers may be taking notice. Their conversation was interrupted by an urgent message from Earth. Admiral Vexilor had requested an emergency meeting with Earth's leadership. His ship had just entered orbit, unannounced. 3 hours later, Frank found himself back in the Geneva meeting facility along with President Clark, General Martinez, and other key officials. Admiral Vexilor entered alone, without Ambassador Zorn or any other hegemony representatives. Thank you for agreeing to this meeting on such short notice, Vexilor said, his usual arrogance replaced by obvious anxiety. What's so urgent, Admiral? President Clark asked. After returning to hegemony space, I reported our revised agreement with Earth. Vexilor's 4 eyes blinked rapidly. The response was unexpected. The Hegemony Council has been dissolved. Our home system is under attack. Gasps filled the room. By whom? General Martinez demanded. The Draconians. Vexilor replied, his voice heavy. A species we encountered centuries ago in the Outer Rim. We claimed they had been subjugated, but in truth, we avoided their territory after losing several ships to their defenses. He placed a data device on the table, projecting images of massive black vessels with red glowing patterns across their hulls. They've been watching us for generations, containing our expansion without revealing themselves. Our confrontation with your fleet and the subsequent treaty somehow triggered them to act. Why come to us? President Clark asked. Because you did what no one has done before. You challenged the hegemony and forced us to acknowledge our deception. The Draconians have already conquered 3 of our core worlds. Our defenses are failing. Vexilor hesitated. I've come to request assistance. The room fell silent. Frank exchanged glances with General Martinez, whose expression remained carefully neutral. You're asking us to fight your war? President Clark finally said. I'm asking for sanctuary for my people, and yes, possibly military assistance. Vexler's pride seemed completely gone now. The Draconians are not like us. They don't bluff, they don't negotiate. They simply take what they want and destroy the rest. How convenient that now you need our help, Frank said, unable to hide his skepticism. Vexler turned to him. I understand your suspicion, Commander Miller, but this is not another deception. The Draconians are real, and they're coming. Your system will likely be next once they're done with ours. President Clark studied the Admiral carefully. We'll need to verify this information. Of course. My ship's data cores are available for your inspection. Very well. In the meantime, we'll convene our Defense Council to discuss this development. After Vexilor was escorted out, Frank turned to President Clark. Do you believe him? I don't know, she admitted, but Captain Shepard's intelligence about other advanced civilizations makes this plausible. Dr. Gordon, have your team analyze the hegemony data immediately. As the meeting broke up, Frank found himself walking beside General Martinez. What do you think? He asked. I think we just went from being the ones laughing to potentially being the ones in trouble, she replied grimly. If these Draconians are real and as powerful as Vexilor claims, we may need to reveal more of our actual capabilities. And if they're not real? If this is another hegemony trick? Martinez shrugged. Then we expose the deception and continue, as planned. Either way, we need to prepare. Over the next 24 hours, Earth's defense systems went to high alert. The Harbinger fleet deployed in a defensive formation around the planet, while long-range sensors scanned for any approaching vessels. Dr. Gordon's analysis came back sooner than expected. He looked troubled as he presented his findings to the Emergency Council. The data appears legitimate, he said. We've detected energy signatures consistent with large-scale weapons fire in the vicinity of what we now know to be hegemony home worlds. Something is definitely attacking them. President Clark nodded gravely. Options? Captain Shepard stood. Madam President, I recommend we send the Harbinger on a reconnaissance mission. We need to see these Draconians firsthand. Assess their true capabilities before making any decisions about intervention. I agree, General Martinez said. And we should prepare Earth for possible first contact with a genuinely advanced hostile species. Very well, President Clark decided. Captain Shepard, prepare your ship for immediate departure. Commander Miller, I want you to go as our executive observer. Frank was surprised. Me, Madam President? You've shown good judgment throughout this crisis, Commander. Besides, between you and Captain Shepard, you might just figure out if we're dealing with a real threat or another elaborate bluff. As Frank left to prepare for the mission, he couldn't help but wonder. Had humanity's laughter at the hegemony's challenge inadvertently awakened something far more dangerous in the darkness, between the stars? The USS Harbinger moved silently through the quantum fold, traveling distances that would take conventional ships years to cover. Commander Frank Miller stood beside Captain Alan Shepard on the bridge, watching as the ship's advanced sensors gathered data on the hegemony home system. We'll exit fold in 30 seconds, announced the navigation officer. Stealth systems engaged. Frank felt a slight vibration as the ship transitioned back to normal space. The main display activated, showing their position just outside the hegemony's central solar system. What they saw left everyone speechless. 3 massive black vessels, each easily 10 times the size of the largest hegemony ship, were positioned around the system's main planet. The vessels had distinctive red energy patterns flowing across their hulls, matching Vexilor's description of Draconian ships. Life signs on the planet? Shepard asked. Minimal, reported the sensor officer. Population centers show significant damage. I'm detecting approximately 20% of expected life forms. Frank studied the Draconian ships. They're just sitting there. Not attacking, not moving. Almost like they're waiting for something, Shepard agreed. Run a complete analysis of their hull composition and energy signatures. For several hours, the Harbinger observed from a safe distance, collecting data on the invaders. Dr. Gordon worked furiously in the ship's laboratory, analyzing everything they could detect about the mysterious vessels. Incoming transmission, the communications officer suddenly announced. It's on all frequencies directed at our position. Shepard and Frank exchanged alarmed looks. They've detected us. How? Unknown, sir. They shouldn't be able to see through our stealth systems. Put it on screen, Shepard ordered. The display changed to show what appeared to be a human woman with striking red hair and unusual golden eyes. Frank felt a chill as he realized this was no human. Earth vessel, she said, her voice melodic, but with an unnatural undertone. We've been expecting you. Shepard straightened his uniform. This is Captain Alan Shepard of the USS Harbinger. Who am I addressing? I am Sentinel Kira of the Draconian Collective. We observed your interaction with the hegemony deception. It was amusing. Why have you attacked the hegemony worlds? Frank asked. The Sentinel smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. Attacked? No. We are liberating systems that have suffered under hegemony lies for centuries. The surviving population has already joined our collective. Joined willingly, Shepard pressed. Of course, once they understood the benefits of our neural network, resistance was minimal. Frank felt his stomach tighten. Neural network? You mean mind control? The Sentinel's expression hardened slightly. Such primitive terminology. We offer unity, purpose, advancement. The hegemony offered only stagnation through fear. And what do you want with Earth? Shepard asked directly. Your species intrigues us. You saw through the hegemony deception where hundreds of others failed. You possess technological innovation that suggests potential value to the collective. Her golden eyes seemed to stare directly at Frank. We will be visiting your system soon to evaluate this potential. The transmission ended abruptly, leaving the bridge in silence. That wasn't a request, Frank said quietly. It was a notification. Shepard nodded grimly. Prepare for emergency jump back to Earth. We need to warn them immediately. As the Harbinger prepared to return, Dr. Gordon rushed onto the bridge. Captain Commander, you need to see this. He activated a secondary display showing analysis results. I've been studying their ships, and there's something very strange about them. Strange how? Frank asked. Their technology is advanced, yes, but inconsistent. Some systems show quantum-level engineering we can barely understand, while others are surprisingly conventional. Gordon highlighted sections of the display. And look at these energy patterns. They're designed to be visible, intimidating. Shepard frowned. What are you suggesting? I think we're seeing another bluff, but a more sophisticated one. Gordon pointed to specific readings. These Draconians have some advanced technology, but they're projecting an appearance of being far more powerful than they actually are. Just like the hegemony did, but better. Frank considered this. So the galaxy is full of species pretending to be more dangerous than they really are? Is anyone telling the truth out there? That's the question, isn't it? Gordon replied. Back on Earth, the Defense Council reviewed the Harbinger's findings with growing concern. The footage of Sentinel Kira was particularly disturbing. If their neural network technology is real, they represent a fundamentally different threat than the hegemony, President Clark noted. Admiral Vexlor, who had been granted temporary asylum, looked defeated. The Draconians have been moving through the outer systems for centuries, absorbing populations into their collective. We exaggerated our power to keep species from allying with them. General Martinez leaned forward. Dr. Gordon believes their power projection is also partially a bluff, that they're not as overwhelming as they want us to believe. Even if that's true, Frank pointed out, they've still conquered the hegemony worlds with minimal resistance. President Clark stood up, addressing the room. Then we need to present a united front. If these Draconians respond to shows of strength, we'll give them one they won't forget. Over the next 2 weeks, Earth prepared for the anticipated Draconian arrival. But instead of just military preparations, President Clark initiated something unexpected. She invited representatives from all former hegemony worlds, those not yet conquered by the Draconians, to come to Earth. The hegemony maintained power through division and deception, she explained to Frank during a private meeting. We'll counter the Draconians with unity and truth. When 3 Draconian vessels finally appeared at the edge of the solar system, they found not just Earth's fleet waiting for them, but ships from 27 formerly subjugated species, all arranged in a defensive formation. Sentinel Kira's face appeared on communication screens throughout the assembled fleet. "This is unexpected," she admitted, her golden eyes narrowing. "You formed an alliance?" "Not an alliance," President Clark responded from Earth Command. "A coalition of free worlds, each maintaining their independence while working together for mutual defense and prosperity. Something neither the hegemony nor your collective offers. You cannot resist the inevitable progress the collective represents," Kira insisted, though Frank noticed a hint of uncertainty in her tone. "We're not interested in resistance," Clark replied calmly. "We're interested in genuine cooperation. Your collective absorbs and erases. Our coalition connects while preserving what makes each species unique. And if we choose to take what we want by force?" Kira challenged. Captain Shepard, commanding the Harbinger at the front of the coalition fleet, smiled. "You're welcome to try, but fair warning, we've analyzed your ships thoroughly. Your weapons aren't nearly as powerful as you want us to believe, and your hulls aren't nearly as impenetrable." A tense silence followed. Frank, standing on the Harbinger's bridge beside Shepard, held his breath. The Draconians had conquered the hegemony through fear and the perception of overwhelming power. Now that bluff was being called. Finally, Sentinel, Kira spoke again. "Perhaps there is value in discussion before any hasty actions are taken." President Clark's response was gracious but firm. "We welcome dialogue with the Draconian Collective, as equals. Our representatives can meet on neutral territory to explore potential areas of cooperation." As the immediate threat of invasion faded, Frank gazed at the assembled coalition fleet on the display. Dozens of species, all previously kept separated and intimidated by hegemony lies, now standing together. "You know what's ironic?" he said to Shepard. "When the hegemony first challenged us, we laughed at their bluff. Now the whole galaxy is changing because of that moment." Shepard nodded. "Sometimes the most powerful weapon isn't technology or numbers. It's simply the courage to call someone's bluff." Frank smiled. "And to offer a better alternative." As negotiations with the Draconians began, word spread throughout the galaxy. The age of deception was ending. A new era of genuine cooperation, led by the species that had laughed in the face of false power, was just beginning.